All right, we're going to get started. How's everyone's morning going? Good? Excellent. Well, I appreciate your time and attending this session. And I think we're now realizing why maybe we're being attacked, because this room should be completely full with this topic, right? We should be standing room only with this topic, but I digress. So what we're going to do today in this session is we're going to dive into both on-prem AD as well as Azure AD, talking about the different areas that we absolutely need to verify are correctly configured, because if we don't do that, we might be the headline news tomorrow on the news. So there are definitely some areas in both on-prem AD and Azure AD that need attention, and we're going to dive into the GUI. We're going to talk about commands. We're going to talk about how to secure these things and move forward to make sure that we have the correct security setup. As a brief introduction, this is me. I don't have my LinkedIn up here, but please follow me on LinkedIn. I'll follow you back. I am often on LinkedIn. It's a great way to share information. I do a lot of research. I was on LinkedIn easily for an hour this morning just doing research, looking at different things. It's a great platform for that. Email is correct. So if you do have any questions about the session today, any follow-up questions, anything, please email me. I'm more than happy to reach out, answer any questions. I do work for a company called QOMPLX, which we really focus on identity security. If you were in my session yesterday, we kind of talked about the identity security stack in terms of what needs to be in place to secure your identities beyond MFA and PAM, which we'll talk a little bit about today. If you weren't in my session yesterday, we'll reiterate that. So anyway, that's how you can keep track of me. The goal of today is to kind of talk about identity as the new security boundary. I've been around technology and especially Active Directory for a while. You know, back in the early 2000s, we were saying, oh, the boundary is the domain. And then we said, no, the boundary is the forest. And then we said, no, the boundary is something else. Well, now the boundary is identity. The security boundary is identity because we've completely changed our model of the enterprise, right? Many of you work from home. I work from home. We don't really have the true enterprise network anymore. It is the sprawl, as I call it, of the network. And now we have to make sure that we're not only taking care of what we have physically, but what we're paying someone else to take care of in the cloud as well. So we'll talk about that. We'll break down the attacks, and then we'll get into the security settings. Numbers, statistics, really important. Everyone has cloud. Everyone still has on-prem. If you think you're going to get rid of on-prem anytime soon, has anyone successfully removed domain controllers? No domain controllers at all for Active Directory. Anyone successfully removed them? Okay, great. So yesterday I was talking with some gentlemen, and they're like, yeah, in July, which is a month away, we are going to eliminate our on-prem Active Directory. So I pulled out my wallet and I said, can I put some money down on this? I'm willing to take odds. It's just not going to happen, right? We're not going to eliminate on-prem AD. We may use it less, but my comment here is you can't be kind of pregnant. You either have AD on-prem or you don't. And if you have on-prem AD, you're susceptible to attacks that are related to on-prem AD, okay? If you don't think it's that important, the attackers will abuse you, okay? So please keep in mind that on-prem AD is going to be around for a while. You have to secure it. You have to give it just as much attention as the cloud, because the attackers are going to go after the weakest link. And if you are not securing on-prem AD, they're going to go after it, okay? Now, in the same breath, I'm going to say that I've never seen a secure Active Directory environment. Ever. Ever. Okay? When it's installed, it's insecure. I have never seen a secure Azure Active Directory environment. If you start diving into Azure Active Directory, you're going to see Microsoft failed to secure Azure AD just like they did on-prem AD. Okay? So you have to give it the attention that it needs, because the attackers are going after what is not secure, and they only need read access. We're going to talk about that in just a minute as well. So for most organizations, you have something like this. You have on-prem AD in some capacity, and again, if you have domain controllers living in the cloud, that's on-prem AD, right? It's the traditional Active Directory infrastructure. And then you have other stuff, right? Some have a little, some have a lot up in the cloud for identities. You may be syncing it, you may not be syncing it. The attackers don't care. As long as there is a communication avenue from on-prem into the cloud, that's all they need. That is all they need. So we have to understand what is the low-hanging fruit, right? We only have 50 minutes. I can't go through everything you need to secure an AD, but I don't have to. I'm going to go over the critical configurations that need to be addressed daily to make sure that you are securing your environment, right? Some things about AD and Azure AD. Microsoft loves to confuse their community, okay? How many different policies do we have, right? You have a policy here, you have a policy there. Well, now they've taken that concept to Active Directory, right? You have traditional on-prem Active Directory, you have Azure Active Directory, you have Azure Active Directory directory services, and they're all different, okay? So, AD and Azure AD, not the same, okay? Azure AD is not Active Directory in the cloud. It is not Active Directory in the cloud. Last month, I was up in Redmond at an event for MVPs, and even Microsoft finally is clearly saying Azure Active Directory is not Active Directory in the cloud. Not even close. No domain controllers, no group policy, no organizational units, nothing is even similar, except for you can sync the two, all right? Most organizations are hybrid. It's a 50-50 shot. I'll ask someone, do you have Azure Active Directory? No. Do you have Office 365? Yes. Okay, then you have Azure Active Directory. No, we don't. Yes, you do. But we don't administer Azure Active Directory. Okay, do you go into the Office 365 portal and create users? Yes. That's Azure Active Directory. Okay, Microsoft is confusing us, right? But almost everyone has a hybrid environment. Just because you care more about Azure Active Directory, right, the shiny new object, doesn't eliminate the need to secure on-prem AD. You have to secure it. You could have a setting in on-prem AD that was established in 2002 that was never, ever addressed, and the attacker can see it and take advantage of that. Just because you don't know it, just because you don't see it, doesn't mean it can't be exploited, right? Azure AD is just as messed up as Active Directory, even more so, okay? There is a great website, AAD Internals. Use it, abuse it. It is nothing but a research organization that spends time after time on Azure AD, helping us understand what is vulnerable and where we need to secure things, okay? And Azure AD has just as many avenues to be exploited as Active Directory. They're just different. They're radically different, okay? because it's a totally different infrastructure. You might as well say it's Microsoft and Novell. It's that different, okay? Different terms, different names, different constructs, different everything. But since we have it, we have to secure it. Now, let's talk about the attacker. I showed this yesterday. I think it's a very important graphic for a couple of reasons. We know exactly what the attacker is going to do. No attacker is doing something unique, right? So over here on the left, what do? Hey, what are we going to attack today? Then they attack. How? I don't know. There's a lot of different ways that they're going to attack us. Primarily, though, they're exploiting vulnerabilities and misconfigurations. In my opinion, the concept of vulnerability management is almost a joke. Can we patch everything? No. Should we? No. I mean, the percentages, I mean, you hear like 5 to 8% of all vulnerabilities are exploited. The rest aren't even exploited. So we only have to patch less than 10%. Are we? I know you're not going to yes, I'm not patching anything, right? We're afraid to patch. For those of you that are Microsofties, Microsoft taught us years ago not to patch. Why don't we patch? Because it breaks things, right? That's why we don't patch. So we are vulnerable. The attackers can scan, see exactly where we're vulnerable, just like misconfigurations. Now, let me clearly define the difference between a vulnerability, in my terms, and a misconfiguration. A vulnerability has a CVE. It has a patch. I can install a patch, and the problem goes away. A misconfiguration doesn't have a CVE. It's the fact that we have a configuration, and I say it's misconfigured because it's a security issue, but I may have to have it, right? We have a computer. The computer server is running a service. The service needs to talk with another computer on the network, so we have to set up delegation. When we install the service, it goes in and toggles delegation to be unconstrained Kerberos delegation. Did we even know that? No. Did it tell us? Maybe. But we need the setting to be there. But it's a huge problem. Okay? That would be a misconfiguration. Those are things that we're going to have to pay attention to. We have to have visibility that these settings are there, and we have to understand that that risk is there, so we have to take additional measures to secure that environment. All right? Now, we've thrown technologies at securing our environments. Many times we throw technologies at the endpoint because we have more of those. And we don't trust users. I mean, wouldn't our lives be better without users? I mean, I know my life would be better without users, right? But we have to secure these endpoints. So we throw PAM and MFA and different technologies, right? Antivirus. Does anyone in here absolutely trust your antivirus software? I don't think so, right? But it does what it's supposed to do, but it doesn't do everything that we need. EDR, right? Everyone needs an EDR. Just search. Whatever technology you have in place for your EDR, just go online, search, EDR bypass, vendor name. And boom, you're going to get everything you need to know about how to bypass that EDR. But we need it, okay? Just like MFA and PAM. Now, with regard to identity, many of us are forced by our insurance companies, to get MFA and PAM. MFA and PAM really don't address identity security. Okay? What we're going to talk about today, you will see that MFA and PAM don't address it at all. They address something different. Okay? For those of you who were in here yesterday, I went through a couple of examples. I'll go through them again. MFA, multi-factor authentication. It is the fact that you are going to prove in different ways you are who you are. That's all it does. I go to the hotel desk, I'm checking in, I give my driver's license and my passport. 2 multi types of authentication. That's all I did. That's all I did. Did it secure the identity? No, it didn't change the identity at all. Okay? MFA does not secure the identity. It secures the fact that the identity is proving it's the identity more than just a password. That's all it does. Okay? Privilege access management. Do you know what this technology does? I mean, take a step back and don't just say, yes, we have PAM and it's great for identity security. No. Do you know what the PAM actually does? It controls when a user has privileges. That's all it does. That's it. Do I have privileges or not? Does that secure the identity? No, it doesn't. It doesn't change the identity at all. It just says, can I do something or can I not do something? That's all it is. Okay? Do I need both of these technologies? Yes. Everyone needs both of these technologies. I don't care if you're a 50 user shop or a 500,000 user shop, you need both of those technologies. But do not fool yourself in that they actually secure the identity, because they do not secure the identity. Okay? But that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to actually secure identities. We're going to go in and we're going to secure the identity to make sure that the attackers cannot exploit us and breach us in minutes. Because most Active Directory environments that I see can be breached in less than 4 hours. So when I read the news, X company was breached, not shocking. I think it's what, AT&T that holds the record for the most breaches in the last X number of months. Does anyone think that those are unique breaches? Because they're not, right? There is no way that an organization that size can secure something in such a way that the attacker had to re-enter and breach it. They put in a backdoor. They put in persistence, such that the attacker could just get back in. How difficult is it to find all of the avenues that an attacker puts in for a backdoor? How difficult is it? Nearly impossible. Okay? Which is why you need to look at the breadth of all the different ways that the attacker can get in. So let's take the first one. Privileged users with SPNs. All right? So I'm going to jump over here into my Active Directory environment. And first of all, let's talk about the setting and let's talk about how we pull the information out. So I'm going to throw a bunch of PowerShell commands at you. Don't worry about writing them down. You email me and say, Derek, send me all the PowerShell commands. I'm going to send you a monster list of PowerShell commands that you can run against your environment. Okay? What I want you to understand is what we're doing, why we're doing it. So here, let's first of all run the PowerShell command. I want to get a list of users that have SPNs. Okay? So I have the Kerberos ticketing agent. We'll talk about that later. And I have a user called Maximus that has an SPN, a service principal name. Now, an SPN alone is not a problem because I need service accounts to have SPNs because that's exactly the way they function. The issue is, does the user with the SPN have privileges? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Active Directory here, and I'm going to look for Maximus, and I'm going to come over here to Maximus's attributes, and I'm going to scroll down to service principal name. And you're going to see here, right there, is the SPN. That's what I searched for in that PowerShell command. So Maximus has an SPN, but does Maximus have any membership in groups that has privileges? Well, Maximus is a domain admin. this is what you're looking for. Users with SPNs that have privileges. Because this account can be attacked and you can't stop it. You can't stop it. Any user in your environment can query this account and get information in such a way that they now can impersonate this account and gain access to anything this account has. It's the way it works with Kerberos. Kerberos is a bad protocol. It's the best we have. It's better than LAN Manager, which is still supported today in Active Directory. I call this Jeopardy knowledge, right? Worthless knowledge unless you're on Jeopardy. What operating system was LAN Manager created for? Anyone know? Windows for Workgroups. Wow. You still have any of those machines? Actually, if you have the disk, they may be worth something, right? And the Antique Roadshow. But it's still supported. Why? Backwards compatibility, okay? But even Kerberos has issues. So we need to find the accounts that have SPNs and have privileges, all right? Next, what else do we need to look for? Well, we need to look for unconstrained Kerberos delegations. This is a little tricky. It's a little complicated, okay? Both users and computers can have Kerberos delegations. It allows the account to communicate what I call under the hood. It's at a different level than the network communication that occurs with authentications, okay? You're allowing the account to do something special. Now, in order to find out if someone has unconstrained Kerberos delegations, I'm going to come over here and run my PowerShell command, unconstrained Kerberos delegations, and boom, I have one machine, server 2015. Now let's talk about the reality of how we administer devices. You might have a server in your environment that was or still may be running an application or service. You used to rely on the application or service, but over time, something else replaced it. Did you remove the server? Did you remove the service or application? Or is it still running and you just don't care because you care about the new service and application? Happens all the time, okay? You would be shocked how many organizations say, no. Okay, we have 3 domains and we have one trust relationship outside of our forest. Oh, really? I show you have 2 additional domains and one trust outside of your forest. No. Oh, here it is. All the time. So if you have straggling servers, of course they're going to be there. Asset inventory is very difficult, okay? So this machine may not even be used anymore. But you'll notice it has unconstrained Kerberos delegation. So you have to determine, do I even need the machine? Do I need that setting on that machine? Or can I get rid of it? Or can I increase the security of it? Those are the decisions that you have to make, okay? Now, there's one easy way to make the decision. Let's just unplug the machine. If the phone rings, you plug it back in, okay? Not suggesting that, but that's an easy way to figure it out, right? So if I now go into Active Directory and I come over here to my server 2015 machine, and you'll notice there is a delegation tab. It is set for the first radio button below Do Not Configure, okay? This is unconstrained Kerberos delegation. Now, if you're not familiar with Kerberos delegation, of course, you're going to go and do some research on it to figure out how to secure it. I'm going to shock you a little bit. What you read on the internet may not be true. Just saying, okay? Because if you search, how do I secure Kerberos delegation, it's going to tell you to constrain it. It doesn't secure it, though, because you have multiple levels of constrained delegation. You have to go to the deepest level, okay? You'll notice here in the GUI, I have 1, 2, 3 different options, and there's an option that isn't in the GUI. You have to do it through PowerShell. Resource-based delegation. Complicated, very difficult to understand. What you need is visibility. You have to know which machines are susceptible. Just like SPNs, this is broken in terms of security. Someone can query this machine, get information from that machine because it coughs it up. It has to, based on the way it was built, and now it can be exploited. So we have to know what we have. Visibility is essential here, which is why I'm giving you the PowerShell commands. You have to know what you have, okay? So at this point, we've queried users that have SPNs, and we've queried computers that have unconstrained Kerberos delegations. What else do we need to be concerned about? Well, we have to worry about something called primary group IDs. All right? Some of you don't even know what that means. There's a reason. This is a configuration that Microsoft created in the early 2000s to support interoperability with certain environments. Which environments? Well, if I come over here to my group configuration, you will notice at the bottom it says set primary group. And I know it's hard to read, so I'll read it to you what it means. There is no need to change primary group unless you have Mac clients or POSIX compliant applications. Does anyone have a POSIX compliant application? Does anyone even know what the heck that means? Okay? This is an old, way old technology back in the Unix days. And back then, Unix didn't understand the group membership. Has that changed? Of course it's changed. But think about this. Let's say it's the year 2002. I have a POSIX compliant application. I have to configure the primary group ID. So I configured the primary group ID on, 20 accounts. 5 years later, we upgrade and no longer even need to worry about the primary group ID. Did you go back in and remove the primary group ID and set it back to the default? Or did you just leave it and you not even thought about it again? That's the problem. Okay? I find that 80% of organizations have primary group ID set, and they didn't even know they had them set. And the issue is when you have a primary group ID set to a privileged account, that's the issue. So let's decrypt this. So first of all, I'm going to show you the PowerShell command. So let's go to users with primary group ID not set to 513. We'll decrypt what that means in just a minute. So you'll notice here Maximus is our problem user, has a primary group ID set to 512. Okay? We want it set to 513, which is the default. How does this work? So let's go into our groups, and let's first of all go to Maximus so I can show you the setting. And we're going to go to our attribute editor, and we're going to come down here to primary group ID. Passed it right there. Now you'll notice it says 512 group RID admins. What does RID stand for here? Anyone know? Relative ID. Okay? We all know what a SID is, right? a security identifier? Well, at the end of the security identifier, after the last dash, is a number. That's referred to as the RID. So this says admins. So if I go to an admin group, because this is a group ID, let's just pick domain admins. And if I come down here to my attribute editor and I go to object SID, security identifier, you will notice that at the end here, after the dash, is 512. So Maximus is configured to have the RID for domain admins as its primary group ID, which immediately means Maximus is a domain admin. So what can an attacker do? Show me all users that don't have a 513 primary group ID, and if it has 512, immediately they know that account is a domain admin. Okay? Now, if you're working through the GUI, right, Active Directory users, computers, or most of the other Microsoft tools, it will not allow you to configure a primary group ID for a group that the user doesn't have membership in. Excellent. Unless you go around that, right? Have you ever heard of a DC shadow attack? A DC shadow attack is when someone has the ability to configure settings for objects. And they can actually run a tool like Mimikatz and configure the primary group ID, and the user isn't in the group. How many of you have your SOC looking for these settings? This is what you need to look for. Got to look for these. Got to look for these. Okay? The attackers are not doing basic things. They're doing things that you are not looking for. Which is why when you read in the news, X company was breached 9 months ago, and they didn't know it. Because our SOCs aren't looking for it. Okay? I mean, when I talk about identity security, people are like, oh no, we have a good password policy. You're looking at the wrong thing. Sorry. You are focused on the wrong thing. Okay? It's like your home, right? Oh no, we have the highest tech lock on our front door with 3 cameras on the front door. Well, what about the window on the side of the house that the attacker is just going to climb through because the 4-year-old unlocked it and you forgot to lock it back and they just climbed through the window? Oh no, we don't have anything on that. That's the issue here, okay? You have to worry about every possible avenue because the attacker is worrying about it. The attacker is enumerating your environment. And what level of privilege does the attacker need to get everything that I'm showing you here? Read. And what level of privilege does every user in your Active Directory have by default? Read. So when you hear assume breach, that means that at least one of your machines has been breached. And since it's been breached, there's a user there, and the attacker has that account and the password because they bypassed your EDR, they got local privileges, and they have the account. Now they can enumerate your Active Directory. See the pattern? See why I showed you that original graphic on how the attacker's moving through the environment? It's critical to stack all of your security from the endpoint all the way through. You have to look at all the different permutations. You can't be too narrow focused on this, okay? So, we now looked at the primary group ID. SID history. If you have done any type of migration, consolidation, merger or acquisition, you probably have SID history around. Go clean it up if you're done. If you haven't done any of those, query to make sure that none of your users have a SID history configuration. Because a SID history configuration could be nothing more than a SID for a privileged account. And now I have two SIDs. I have my original and my SID history. And it can immediately grant me privileges. How many of your SOCs are looking for configurations of SID history? You got to. You got to. If you're not looking for the right thing. All right, let's talk about admin SD holder. How many have actually heard or know what admin SD holder is? Okay, there's like 4 hands. Not enough, all right? Critical. Admin SD holder is in every Active Directory configuration. It is there by default, okay? Let's decrypt what this means. So over here in my Active Directory environment, I'm going to come down to System, and right there is admin SD holder. Admin, administrative. SD stands for security descriptor, AKA access control list, permissions. Okay? Holder. It holds the access control list for every administrative account. It is the template. It rules what every administrative account's access control list is. All right? So if I go look at this, right, it's just a template, it's an object, but if I go look at this, right here is the ACL for this account. Now, normally I get the question, all right, well, who determines what an administrative account is? Well, Active Directory does. Active Directory determines which accounts get that ACL. How? Well, let's go to probably the most common administrative account, which is domain admins. And if I go to domain admins and I go to my attribute editor, you will notice that there is an attribute called admin count. And when admin count is set to 1, it is deemed to be an administrative account. Groups and users both can have an admin count set to 1. And when they have an admin count set to 1, their ACL must match the ACL of admin SD holder. So I'm the attacker. And I know that you are monitoring the domain admins group and the ACL. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to modify the ACL of the domain admins group because I really want control over every administrator. So what do I modify? The ACL of admin SD holder. And guess what? In 60 minutes, whatever permission I put on admin SD holder, I get for every administrative account. Do you know how many companies that I see looking for the configuration of admin SD holder? It's like less than 1%. It is ripe for the attackers. It's ripe. Okay? Now, this one's a little more complicated. But I do have the PowerShell command. It's actually not a PowerShell command, but I'm going to run it in PowerShell. I'm going to actually show you how to get the ACL for admin SD holder. Okay? I just run a tool called DS ACLs, Directory Service ACLs, right? And now I can see who has permissions on admin SD holder. You should actually do this for all of your OUs is what you should be doing. You have to make sure who has delegations in Active Directory. The top 2 delegations outside of admin SD holder, reset passwords, and modify group membership. Okay? And again, run DS ACLs against that particular object in Active Directory, and now you can see who has permissions. In this case, I'm looking at DS ACLs. I'm looking at admin SD holder to find out who has permissions here, because whoever has permissions here has permissions over every administrative account. This is where the attacker lives. It's read-only access. easy to get this information, easy to decrypt it. But most organizations are not looking at this information, okay? The term shadow admins, I hate the term, but it's there. It's kind of like zero trust, right? I agreed at the beginning of this year that in every presentation I must say the word zero trust. Or is that 2 words? I don't know. So I said zero trust. I've done my duty. Shadow admins. What's a shadow admin? A shadow admin literally is someone that has the ability to do something and you don't know it. That's what a shadow admin is. How many different ways can someone have administrative access? A lot. One is Active Directory delegations. Run DSACLs against your OUs and look for them. 2, user rights. User rights are more difficult, okay? But make sure per machine you know who has user rights, especially in your domain controllers. 3, access control list over files. There are multiple ways that someone can be granted shadow admin capabilities. This is really where we get into the weeds, and it gets really complex in terms of how do we secure Active Directory. It's time consuming. You have to know what commands to run, you have to know exactly what to look for, how to analyze the information, and then when you see something that's wrong, can you actually modify it without breaking something? Right? Azure Active Directory. For those of you that have been around on-prem Active Directory, you're probably familiar with the anonymous user and the pre-Windows 2000 compatible access group. It was a huge problem in the early 2000s. Well, Microsoft recreated that. Thank you, Microsoft. In the guest account in Azure Active Directory, okay? This is a guest that you do not want around. This is a bad thing, okay? Microsoft is finally coming around and they're configuring the guest to be more secure, okay? But you can have the guest account have the same access as a normal user. You have different levels of how you set this. Microsoft does not secure it by default. You have to go in and secure it. That's why I'm saying on-prem AD, Azure AD, not secure out of the box. You have to go in and set these security settings, okay? So, guest users have limited access. That's the default. They can't list objects, but they can read all of this information. Huge problem, okay? Because if you don't know that, and you're allowing guest access, they can go in and they can virtually look at all the critical settings in Azure Active Directory to know exactly where to attack. You must go in and secure your environments. How many Azure Active Directory tenants really need a guest account? Few, very, very few. It would be great if Microsoft were to secure it, and then if I need it, I can enable it. It's not what they do. So you need to go in and set it to the most restrictive setting possible, okay? I suggest you set it to the most restrictive, the very bottom. Don't allow your guests to do anything in Azure Active Directory. Again, if you go out to that Azure Active Directory internals website I was pointing you to, they have article after article after article describing the details around the guest account, what they can do, and they go into details of what can occur, okay? Because by default, guest is enabled. By default, guests can actually ask other users from other environments to be a part of your environment. They can invite other users from other Active Directory environments. It's kind of like you saying, oh no, Joe, come, you can stay in my guest room. And then an hour later, Joe invited 10 other people to your house to stay there. It's exactly what's happening. You do not want that in your Azure Active Directory environment. So make sure you go secure the guest account. Azure AD Connect. Azure AD Connect is the mechanism that links on-prem AD to Azure AD. It's the sync, okay? Now there is a new AD Connect, Cloud Connect. It is much better, cleaner, and it is what I highly recommend. Not for everyone, though. It's about a 95% is perfect for everyone, and there's a 5% it has some limitations, but it's only for the huge enterprises. You need to research this. Go look at the Cloud Connect, and you can have both for a while and migrate over to Cloud Connect. Easier to make the connection, more secure. It's much, much better. One of the issues with Azure AD Connect is you have to have a machine that runs a service. And a service has a service account, right? And what level of privilege does the Azure AD Connect service account have? Admin. Yay, Microsoft, right? So now you have an account that is functioning as your sink that can be exploited. Okay? So I'm giving you settings here that you could run and find out what you have. You have to know what you have. You need the visibility. Okay? And this account can do some really, really bad things. Right? It can dump all of the on-premise password hashes. That doesn't sound good. Right? It can log on to the Azure portal. It can bypass all of your conditional access policies. All right? Which I think conditional access policies are awesome, but if I can bypass them, they're worthless. Okay? I can add credentials. I can modify things. I can actually do a DC sync. We talked earlier about a DC shadow attack. A DC sync is worse. Okay? Basically, a DC sync is the ability for someone to query a real domain controller and go, can you give me all the users and all their hashes? And he says, sure. Do you know what privilege someone needs to do a DC sync? It's not domain admin. It's 2 permissions at the domain level. 2 checks. That's all it is. 2. 2 checks. How many of you are looking for those 2 checks daily to make sure no one has that? Okay? I got one guy raises his hand for everything, no one else is. You gotta do this stuff. Okay? You have to know where you can be exploited. Because if someone can run a DC sync against your Active Directory environment, that means they get, I'm going to go back to it, the Kerberos ticketing agent's hash. They then can crack it offline, and then they can create a golden ticket. Just like in the movie, the golden ticket is everything. You know how difficult it is to detect a golden ticket attack? Extremely difficult. Okay? And if someone creates a golden ticket in your environment, there's only one way to recover. I call it scorched earth. Whew. Everything gone, and you rebuild from scratch. There's no such thing as a recovery from a golden ticket attack. No such thing. Okay? Because if someone created a golden ticket, they can do anything. They can create, modify, delete any account, any configuration in Active Directory. So they're going to do that initially. And you have no idea what they did. You have no idea they were there. So at some point down the road, you find out, oh my gosh, someone did something bad in my environment. How long ago was that? 9 months. Do you think you can restore from backup 9 months ago and still function? No. But if you restore anything before that, you're just restoring persistence and backdoors. This is the major problem that we're dealing with. We are not securing Active Directory and Azure Active Directory to the point we need to. Okay? Conditional access policies. Microsoft is changing this. Those of you that deal with Azure Active Directory know this. Microsoft is changing the defaults for conditional access policies. By default, you have a conditional access policy that does X, Y, Z. Okay? It's the default policy. If you create one conditional access policy, it negates the default. So if you create a conditional access policy to only configure for one user, all the other users lose all that security. Just a warning. And there's no button to say, can you show me the results of the conditional access policy? It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So if you're familiar with group policy and RSOP, result instead of policy, there is no result instead of conditional access policy. It doesn't exist. Okay? Tier 0. Use tiering. Go out to the Microsoft website, look at tiering, put in PAWs, right? Privileged access workstations, create the environment that's going to secure both AD and Azure AD. Okay? I know we went over a lot of stuff today. Email me, I'll send you the commands. But do something, please. Go back to the office and do something. Let's start to secure our environments. We have to take